outstanding. We're so lucky to have Clif as open to us and being on the show as he is. Tomorrow night, everybody. First of all, here's an interesting point, Clif. We just got an email from Barry Kay, and he says an editorial in today's Financial Times, which is the British newspaper, points out a 2001 report, so it's almost 5 years ago, and this is before 9/11, by FEMA, suggested the 3 worst case events include a terrorist attack in New York, a hurricane flooding New Orleans, and finally an earthquake in San Francisco.
Well, isn't that interesting?
Hello, FEMA.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
I wish I had a copy of the whole Financial Times, but I think it would probably be fairly easy to get a hold of.
And even so, the report will probably tell you nothing that we're not aware of, and again, it'll probably be exactly spot on. And we undoubtedly will have that quake. I'm pretty sure we're running into another one of those energy periods because we're having so many GRBs pop in. We saw one of these prior to the Sumatra quake, where over the course of 45 or 50 days we gradually built up. We had these sort of waves of GRBs coming in and strange solar activity. Again, we're at that stage. It's an energy system. Buckminster Fuller called it total energy accounting.
Yep.
He said, don't tell me how many miles per gallon your car gets. Tell me how many barrels of oil it takes to manufacture the car before we then start talking about its miles per gallon.
What made him so smart?
Traumatic life experience and the death of his daughter in a horrific way that cast a level of guilt on him that so affected him that for 85 years later on his deathbed, the only thing he could think of was that hurt he had done to her.
Is that right?
And he spent 2 years in a super deep funk, evolved several techniques for meditation on his own, and reached a certain point of wisdom or enlightenment.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
Anyway, his total energy accounting can be applied to the planet, which he did. And he also came up with the most efficient way of having a national or a global electrical grid in such a way that it would be redundant and no one would ever have to have blackouts. But we'll never go that route. It makes too much sense. It would also eliminate all the poverty really in Africa by providing them with everything that they need in the form of very cheap electricity. In any event, though, he did this thing called total energy accounting for the planet.
Yeah.
How much does the sun put out to us? How much is reflected off the moon? That kind of thing.
Right.
And if you apply that today, you find that we have a whole lot more energy coming in than we did in the 70s even. And that energy must cause changes because we're a complex, dynamic system that can't just absorb the energy forever.
But you're talking about, primarily anyway, energy. More energy today coming in from the sun primarily.
Correct.
Than the 1970s?
Correct. 75 we saw the transition from the hydrogen sun to the helium sun, from the yellow to the white. It finally finished its transition really. And that really was a point of demarcation. Prior to that, 1940 appeared to be when the whole process started. How
come science has not come forward? Because you and I have talked about the changing of the color of the sun before, and nobody, Clif, is picking up on it.
No, that's not true.
Well,
again, maybe there is a very heavy-handed filter laid over everything.
Okay, maybe that's it, yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of people that tell me that is precisely the case, and that the rise in peer review really comes down to the rise in filtering and censorship. And, I mean, you're very well aware of James McCanney.
Oh, Jim is, oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. What then, from a scientific point of view, Clif, could this mean to planet Earth and every living organism in it if we have changed over from a yellow-hued sun to a brilliant white?
Much more energetic, much more of what we call the actinic or burning rays. So on a mundane level, there's going to be more skin cancer and sun damage for the eyes and so on. The good part of it is probably that none of us will live long enough to develop much of that. Because, again, we're facing that 2012 deadline.
And maybe that's the full changeover from yellow to white, or whatever follows white.
Correct.
Ooh.
might even go blue.
Ooh.
And of course, there's all of the indigenous population mythos from Australia through Indonesia, through Malaysia, all the way over to the Amerindians, American indigenous peoples that have the Blue Sun event as marking the actual transition.
Ooh. Isn't that interesting?
Curiouser and curiouser.
Yes, isn't that? I have not heard that before. Tell us, if you would, Clif, tell us a little bit more about the prophecy, but also what could that mean? Well,
the Australian indigenous peoples have this myth about the sun going blue. And it's hard to really, if you get into it, it could be what's known as a plasma discharge, to where all of the planets return their excess plasma, so to speak, to the sun, and it gets really energetic and blue for a moment. But in any event, they talk about the blue event as being the return, if you will, to the dream time, the beginning of the new dream time.
Again, 2012.
Once again, coincidentally, a restart.
Wow.
Now, the Indonesian myths are somewhat similar. They talk about a blue, or a pillar of blue fire that jumps from the earth and goes to the sun and turns the sun blue momentarily. No great negative effects, but it is seen as being, again, a restart, a reset of everything, a cleansing, if you will. And of course, a lot of the cleansing myths are all full of, being washed away by floods and earthquakes, etc.
Yeah. What do you think could happen? Because it wouldn't be a totally dark blue, because the subtle change between yellow and white is so subtle that the average person has no idea what you're talking about. So could it be more like a blue hue coming out and
a blue aura ring around it that was bluish, something along those lines? Yeah.
But could it also mean, if it's blue or approaching indigo, which is the color of the crown chakra, the ultraviolet or violet, that could also mean, it all kind of ties in, doesn't it?
It kind of does, isn't it? It's very interesting how humans would pass knowledge along, because you do have all these interrelated elements. As in the heavens above, so shall be on earth, that kind of thing.
Right.
Replication of the Orion belt on the Giza plateau, and ad nauseum with all of these megalithic structures, etc. And then you have on the Sanskrit and the Taoist side, and in China, you have these sorts of things where you have these, let's just call them coincidences, perhaps meaningful, between, as you say, the colors assigned to the chakras and the various states of the sun, for instance.
Damn.
And then, of course, all the ascension myths.
Jeez, yeah, right. What and how might that be involved in it?
Well, if we get over to I'm not sure about the American Indians and where they get their influence from.
Yeah.
The Mayans, though, are essentially, I don't want to be denigrating, but they weren't originators of their clock or their time myths. They took them from a much older group of people, that were so old that in what's currently Mexico, you would find giant sculptures of every race that we have on the planet and a couple we don't. And so theoretically, how were Mongoloids, Negroids, Australia, and other racial groups shown in Mexico 7, 8, 9,000 years ago, or even older, because we can't date rock, and these things are giant rock carvings. But we do know that this group of people's influence on the Mayan mythos was almost total, in the sense that they adopted it pretty much wholesale, didn't really make too much changes to the clocks and the calendar and so on, and added a few little of their own little wrinkles to things, but kept the myth as it usually was. And that myth for the Blue Sun event and the Ascension is really about the battle of good and evil, so to speak. And it's not an Armageddon kind of a thing, not as is described in the Bible, but a natural catastrophe, the end of time, and people are slaughtered and along with animals apparently by natural circumstances in great numbers, but then within the bardo, that period of whatever that exists on the other side of death, that's where the battle takes place.
Ah, that's a different approach.
Yeah, it's a little curious. And what also is odd, or again, perhaps meaningfully coincident, is that these people also have an intense mythology all around the little gray guys.
Really?
Yeah.
What do they say?
Again, they're in the Mayan context, they're referred to as the incorruptibles, meaning their bodies don't age. They die and can be killed. And also curiously, within the Mayans and there's some stuff in the Sanskrit, my Sanskrit is so poor that it'd take me 20 lifetimes to get through some of the stuff I want to read, so I haven't really pursued it. But there's like descriptions of the anatomy of the gray guys and within the Mayans, and actually where to make your sword cuts to do them in.
Wow.
And coincidentally, they have some things that are within our current mythos. These guys are supposed to be real small, around 4 foot something, 4 foot nothing, big eyes, big heads, and spindly, but yet very strong, and perhaps stronger than humans. And how is this to be accomplished? Well, the Mayans distinctly said, watch out, these guys are basically like this particular kind of plant that opens and closes based on vascular action. So they're hydraulic.
So, which again plays up the part that they may not be, how can I say it, not human, but biologically created. They are a biological robot as such.
Well, okay, but when I say hydraulic, I don't mean to imply pumps or motors.
Yeah, right.
It's still tubes and so on, but obviously a constructed entity, correct?
And possibly with no soul, as we understand it.
I would think that's probably not true in the sense that undoubtedly the overmind has it. It just will never realize it. The
overmind meaning the single mind that controls it all.
Right. The mainframe that is, according to myth, has gone insane.
Yeah. Somebody just wrote in, and I was going to bring it up too. It sounds like the Borg.
Very similar. Isn't that curious? Yes. Well, if you want another curiosity, go and look at Enterprise missions pictures of the moon Iapetus and Spielberg's Death Star.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
Curiouser and curiouser.
Oh, my goodness gracious, jeez.
And then if you really want something that'll start, making the hair stand up on your bald head, here's one for you. Iapetus has a particular shape. It looks like a giant seed. It's hexagonal and so on, and really is worth reading the excellent work that Richard Hoagland did in compiling all of the various anomalies and why it shouldn't be that way. And then also to note that it is remarkably similar to the spheres that are being dug up in South Africa.
Oh, jeez.
Those metalloids?
Yes.
Okay, well imagine a situation then where it's precisely that. It looks like a seed because that's what it is. And those little metalloids were the way in which it injected life into the planet, very much like the Genesis Project kind of stuff with Star Trek. Only without the big flash and the dead Spock and everything.
Oh my gosh.
And they found thousands of those. And they have an uncanny resemblance. We don't know how they're made. They are not identical, but they're within obvious template.
Yep.
They're not mass-produced insofar as we understand it. And they bear a weird relationship to Iapetus, and they're filled with a spongy mass, which would be perfect for putting in proteins and amino acids and stuff, and DNA.
Jeez. Cliff, you got to sit back and say, what is going on? I mean, what truly is happening around us when we have information like this? Information like you've been sharing with us, the Kali Yuga and the time frame we're coming into. And then you boil it down to these idiotic people who basically control the world. And they don't want to know anything.